somewhere.
Because that's information that they have to
Right,
tell you, right?
right,
I mean,
right.
if you ask,
would
is
think
that
so.
a, is that a,
Yeah, I would think so.
Around fundraising
Yeah.
and corporate
Yeah,
governance
it's
and that
definitely
type of,
published
those
somewhere.
areas.
Right, right, and you're right, especially for, you know, right, for donors, for alums, for people that are, you know, anybody that's involved in a capital campaign or anything like that. So it's definitely there, you just have to find it.
Mhm.
Yes.
I'm a newbie, I'm the parent of a freshman, so I have to refer back to when I was doing this many years ago. Is there some place, like in the old days, I remember Playboy often did, where was the party schools, and, you know, if you wanted that, that was a great guide, but as a parent now, I wouldn't want that. So, can you offer up, as you go deeper into this, the suggestions on maybe websites that are non-academically oriented, that are rating the schools on other criteria?
There are actually a lot of them. The one I like best is College Prowler.
Probably.
That is one of them. There's also College Confidential. Philip, which you go on?
I use College Prowler the
You use
most.
College
Yeah.
Prowler? Yeah, that's the one I like the best. And basically that's input from students, and there are ratings there from like A to D or A to F on there as far as things like boys, girls, drugs, you know, all those
And
things.
there's top 10 lists for anything you
Yeah, there are.
don't want to think about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But those are sites that give you a different perspective.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly,
thank
because
you.
they're coming from students too, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. College Confidential is a little bit harder to navigate than College Prowler. I think College Prowler is pretty straightforward. That's a good one. Just to get back to talking about the itinerary, there are a number of different ways that we've worked with people and that people have actually planned their vacation, planned their itineraries. You can add it onto a family vacation. So it may be that you're not just doing college visits. It may mean that you're going and you're doing fewer college visits and you're combining that with sightseeing and other things. We've had some clients that have said to us in the past that they've done as part of a business trip, so maybe you're traveling and your son comes up to meet you afterwards and you tag that on because you're near a place that he wants to look at, or they go with you. When I was working at schools, my dad, I grew up on the East Coast, my dad was doing a trip up to Boston for business, and I was invited up to Tufts for the day, so he took me with him. He dropped me at Tufts, he did his thing, I did my thing, and then he picked me up at the end of the day. So there are all kinds of possibilities. We can tie that in with other things. Or you can do, you know, as many of us do, is a strictly college visit trip where pretty much you're going with that goal in mind, and you do a college visit a day for a week. So there's a number of different ways that you can incorporate the visits.
We sort of recommend one-ish a day. If you do more than one between traveling between, you know, it sort of turns into that, if it's Tuesday, I must be wherever. We just had a family who did 18 in 7 days, and we're shaking our head.
Yeah, I don't
It was-
understand. I don't understand how she knows anything that she saw, how she can make any kind of decision, or how she could get any kind of a feel for being on campus for, you know, an hour and a half. It just, I don't know, makes sense to me. And the only way you could get, I mean, there are times where, I mean, I'm planning a trip for next week for a long weekend for a student, and he's going primarily into Ithaca College. But he said, well, I'm going to be there anyway, could I look at Cornell? So what we did was he did the primary stuff at Ithaca and then figured out how he could still do a tour at Cornell, and then they can stay on campus if they choose to afterwards. So you can, you know, if they're that close, I mean, they're 5 minutes away. Or for instance, you were doing, say, Philadelphia, and you've got Newton and Drexel, which are literally across the street from each other. So there are ways around that, where if there's one school that you decide, the same thing, you don't necessarily need all those in-depth. You don't want to visit with a faculty, and you're not ready at that school, you can consider that. Then you probably fit, but if you're doing more of an in-depth and you want to spend any kind of time on the campus, we do recommend that you also do one a day. Well, plus, we'll talk about that, there's travel time involved. So that you have to take into consideration too. And you don't want to be totally, these trips are, what we hear people say to us is these trips are exhausting, but they're great. They're great for a number of reasons. One is that you're spending one-on-one time with your son or daughter, that you're away from everything else. And so this is why you're there, and this is the time you get to spend doing just this. And so it's really special. So they are tired. You're doing a lot of walking, but at this, and usually a lot of driving, but at the same time, they're really quite rewarding.
Can somebody maybe turn the lights back on when you're outside?
Is this tape right here?
Yeah.
Oh, really? Can I do
This is
this?
what-
The other one.
The other one.
Or else he doesn't use
Thank you.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about where you are in the process, whether you're new at this or whether you are in, say you're starting for the first time, or you've done some trips. So this is what I call like the overview visit. So it would be, say, maybe a group tour, an information session, maybe it's a meal in a dining hall, and then you want to go to another school, or this is your second school of the day, like we talked about, and this would be enough for the day at that school. Maybe you'll come back to it if your son or daughter is really interested. But then there's what we call the extended visit, which is just more in-depth, and you may decide to do an interview, sit in on a class, an overnight stay, as we talked about, meet with a coach, a faculty member, and take some time to see maybe some of the facilities. A lot of the schools, when they do the group tours, do not cover all the facilities. Some of them maybe don't go into the science buildings. A lot of them, you've got a performing arts kid. A lot of them do not go into the performing arts facilities. So that may be something when you're planning your visit that you request from, find out how can I see the performing arts facilities, or my student is an athlete. How can I see where he would swim, or where are the tennis courts? Because they don't necessarily all take you, or again, especially the bigger schools, don't take you to all the facilities. But if that's something that you think that your teen wants to see, then that's something you might take into consideration when you are making your plans to visit the schools. Really, I wanted to mention about the class visits. It's kind of interesting. I like the idea of class visits for a couple of reasons. One is that it's really interesting when you're a student, and sometimes they will let the student and the parents sit in on the class visits. Sometimes they will say students only. So, and usually it says right there when you're online, or if you talk, if you have to arrange it through admissions, they'll tell you. But I like to see if I'm sitting in there, or see what my son or daughter says, and how engaged the students in the class were. How were they? What was their reaction to what was going on? Were they engaged? Were they contributing? How did they look? That's one thing, is what kind of reactions they get by sitting in the class. And the other is interesting. We went down to College of Charleston, and my son had said he didn't want to sit in the class. I said, well, I think you should sit in on the class. And he sat in on an introduction to psychology class, and he came out and was really excited about it. And he said that he could actually answer some of the questions that the professor was asking. And I think for a lot of kids, being in this classroom makes them realize that college isn't necessarily this big thing that they can't, that's going to be so different that it's going to be that hard for them. I think if they're well prepared and they go to college, especially that their introductory classes are going to be something that aren't so scary and hard. I mean, they're ready for it, and they see this, I think, by sitting in on some of these classes sometimes. So once you've sort of figured out the schools that you want to go to, and where you want to be, East Coast, West Coast, you want to start mapping your route. Some of the things we talk about is being aware of traffic and weather, especially if you are going to visit these schools in the winter time, and estimate the amount of time you think you're going to need on campus. If you want to do the information session and the tour, and you want to meet with the faculty member, let's figure out how much time you want on each campus, because that's going to affect, again, how many schools you can visit in one day, and how long it's going to, and you want to figure out how long it's going to take you to get from place to place. And this is, I always say prepare for the unexpected. If you are visiting Chicago in the winter time, you may hit bad weather. And so you may think about, well, if we're going to be doing any driving in Chicago and it's winter time, maybe we want to make sure we've got a flashlight in the car, or we throw some blankets in the car, just in case we get stuck and we're sitting on a freeway for a couple of hours. I also tell people to have printed directions. Everybody has their GPS, whether it's on their phone or in their car, but they're not always they're not always exact. The directions are not always taking you to the exact place where you need to go. You'll find on the websites for the colleges, if you're looking at them for directions, that it may just be a name of a building. So you get to a certain spot and then you need to figure out, well, how do I get to the admissions building from where this takes me? So you do want to make sure that you check on the websites to make sure that there aren't specific directions to get to the exact place where you have to go.
Most schools today have built apps that are campus related. So if you are going to a big campus and you're walking around a lot, you might want to download the app and sort of get a sense as to how to get from the parking lot to a specific building. Or even this morning, it's like we were on this campus a lot, we parked in a different structure, and a student was walking by. I said, "How do you get there?" And that's how you strike up a conversation.
So once you've gotten the idea of the itinerary and you've figured out that we can go from point A to point B to point C, like for instance, I'll just use as an example, this one I'm doing for this weekend, which is from Boston, that's where they live, and you're going from there to Union College in Schenectady, New York, and then they're driving from there to Ithaca College, and then from there to Rochester. So you've got that figured out and everything works. You want to make sure that everything works with the calendar that you have for the schools, that you can fit in all the times for the information sessions that they have, and that that gives you the times you need to get from place to place. You want to make your arrangements on campus, and you want to figure out your on-campus logistics. And the first things we talked about was arranging the group sessions and individual meetings. I usually do those first, and then I work everything else around that, because I do think that that's as I mentioned, the base of the visit, and it just gives you a good background so that you know what kind of questions you don't need to ask after that, or what you do want to ask, or where you want to go. So I do that first, and then everything comes around that. Parking, especially at the bigger schools or at the city schools, is crazy. So you want to pay specific attention to what's on their website about the parking. If it doesn't make sense, call them. I call a lot about parking because it's not always clear. There was one website I was on yesterday, and it still made it's like, well, they're telling you to go here, but they don't say anything about parking. So where am I supposed to tell my person to go when they get there? So just call if you have any questions about the parking. Some places will email you when they give you confirmation. Some places will email you and tell you that they'll send you a parking permit. Some places tell you to go in and get a parking permit. Some just tell you this is where you can park, and if it's full, make sure you don't park in the meters or make sure you don't leave them for more than 2 hours because you're going to get a ticket. So you have to be aware of parking. It's a big thing. Toward confirmation, some places want you to bring your actual confirmation with you, some don't. So be aware of all of these things when you're making your plans.
One of the things that Janice and I do suggest for our clients, and we bring up in presentations like this, is that as you get into this process, a lot of information starts coming into your house, whether it's your snail mail, mailbox, or your email. And one of the things that we started doing a few years ago with Philip is that we created an email address specific for the college search. So, it's his initials, his graduation year, and we did it on Google, and we share it so that everybody sees it. We're not looking at his personal. We can remind him, he reminds us, and it tends to take some of the stress out of the process because parents are informed and can, and then when the information starts coming back in, if you're filling out an application, and I guess it's up to the student whether he puts or she puts their specific information to come back. I know, but Just, you know, a suggestion.
It works pretty well. I'll go a little faster, I know you guys are up as well. Travel arrangements, one of the things